Yay, we are live. Hello everybody and welcome to the Gamma Dames. For once we're actually almost on time, which is kind of amazing for us, and hopefully we won't be having any technical issues this week. Wouldn't that be nice? As usual, we will introduce ourselves. I am Holly.
I'm Lucy. And I'm Sarah, and we are joined by Rick Remender. Thank you for joining us, Rick.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
We got some Facebook questions already, haven't we? So should we start with those?
Yeah, we could just launch straight in, I think. Awesome.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first? I've got Twitter ones here.
All right, one sec, I shall load. You start with the Twitter.
Cool. Oh, before we get started, I'm just going to get this out the way so I don't scream the whole way through. I am a giant fan of Rick's. So firstly, just like, thank you for making everything that's amazing. I'm a giant Deadly Class, Tokyo Ghost, and the Winter Soldier book you did as well. So thank you.
Thank you. That's very nice of you. I like to sit around and type, and it has no heavy lifting required. And so it's much easier when people purchase the books and read them. I found that money helps the sitting and the not leaving the house. So.
Yes, yeah, it does. I don't think I've had, because I'm not sure if Sarah mentioned, but we all have or work in comic book shops.
Yeah.
So I haven't had anyone, like, I've recommended Deadly Class to everyone, and I don't think they didn't like it. Everyone's come back and been like, I need the next one.
Thank you.
That's rather good.
Well, I ran a comic book shop in the early 90s when there was a lot of bad comics being made, and I felt like it was my responsibility to try to push good comic books on people. And I know that the shops that decide to push the books, you basically dictate, I think, a lot of what gets sold in the shops based on your tastes and what you like and what you feel confident recommending. When I lived in San Francisco, I lived on Haight Street right by Amoeba Records, which I don't know if you know about Amoeba, but it's basically back in the day before we went digital, because I'm old. We used to go to record stores. And these are places where they sell physical records and CDs. But the people who worked there basically curated different things, and it was such a different experience because you would go in and talk to people and have music recommended. And I think that that one of the last places we still have that is comic book stores. So I appreciate you dig the jive that I'm writing and push it on unsuspecting people who wander in.
Yeah, very much so. Oh, that's one of the questions we had, but it was kind of a question from me as well. I know there was talks, I think it was last year, about a Russo brothers produced Deadly Class series. Do you know, or like, can you say any more about if that's still happening, or
Yeah.
what the situation is with it?
Yeah, I'm writing the pilot right now. We have a network. We haven't announced it yet. And it's moving forward. So it's really just up to me to finish writing this pilot, which we've been working on the outline for the pilot for well over a year now, I guess. And it's really taken on a wonderful shape. It reflects the comic book, but it develops because we can unpack the story a little more. We have more time. It really does a wonderful job, I think, of unpacking the characters and allowing us to get a bigger picture of the school and sort of a deeper look at each one of the main 5 students. Marcus is obviously still the focus, but the other kids all get much more screen time. And yeah, the notes that have been coming in, our showrunner is the showrunner from shows like Outcast and Banshee, and he's Adam Targum, really wonderful writer, and he's been really giving us wonderful direction. And then the Russo brothers have really helped shape it. And then our studio is Sony, the people who made Breaking Bad, and they've got a lot of really wonderful ideas too. And then the network, who I wish I could talk about, the exec we're working with has made one of my very favorite shows in recent history. And then the notes come back from that team, and they're great. And it's been a wonderful experience. And I think that the show, if we get the order, is going to be pretty special.
That's amazing. I'm so excited.
I think there's going to be a lot of people that are
so
very
excited.
excited. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. We have an awesome question on Twitter, actually, from Joseph Leader. He says, you find exquisite ways to take characters to their breaking point and yet bring them out the other side, even with character death or ultimate destruction. Do you ever find yourself at a point in your stories where you fear that you may have gone too far and there is no way back?
Well, I think that's what I try to go too far and make it seem that there's no point back. And so a lot of the time I spent and a lot of the agonizing I do in the outline stage is to make sure that I've got the way they get out planned in advance so that it's not a cheat. The last thing you want is for the reader to feel like it's some sort of haphazard bullshit that the person cooked up at the last minute. You know, you want a satisfying story that you can tell that there is an intention. And so to that end, I write very detailed outlines. I workshop them with my editor, Sebastian. I workshop them with the artists. The artists are all very involved, and we collaborate very closely. And what we come out the other end with is something that, you know, if and when they do rise up out of it, and sometimes I like to drop them down into the pits and leave them there because that's life. It's not satisfying, but it's true to it's true to how things go a lot of the time. But ultimately, as long as I have a plan ahead of time on how they're going to rise or what the solutions are going to be, I like to try to then see how far down I can take them into the hopelessness. And I think that by leaving some people down there, and not everybody gets the ascension, not everybody's arc leads them to the other side of the rainbow. I think that the stakes are higher, and that you don't know who's going to make it. And if I've done my job right, you care about them, and you worry for who is going to pull it together and who isn't. Yeah,
I was just going to say that, actually. It makes you, I think, reading towards the end of the second volume of Tokyo Ghost, I was like this the whole way through. But I think it makes you care so much more for the characters, because a lot of the big sort of like event stuff that the big two have been doing, there's no actual peril, because you're just like, well, they're going to come back. Like, it's not, it completely takes you out of it, because you're like, well, this doesn't really have any impact.
Sure.
Whereas the stuff that you tell, you're like literally anyone could die in the worst way. Like, this is terrifying in the best way.
Well, it's the difference between being able to tell your own stories and you know, novelists don't have to dance around the fact that, you know, Batman's probably going to come back. You know, people in every other, you know, television, comic books is the only place that sees the perpetuation of corporate-owned, colorful men and women of action as the big two. And I think that's going to change. I think it's changing more and more. I think we need Marvel and DC Comics. I think they bring people in. They're the gateway to most kids coming into finding the art form. And I think that they have made both companies tremendous works in the past. But the limitations are apparent to everybody grinding away on those jobs. And somebody asked me once at a con, you know, why don't I go to DC? And DC and Marvel have been contacting me, and they've been wonderful to me throughout my career. It's just not where I want to be anymore. And they go, well, wouldn't you want to write Batman? You've never done Batman. And I was like, I would. And you know, maybe someday I'll have to scratch that itch to write a 10 issue Batman thing or something. But ultimately, just like you said, what you're dealing with is a character who, really the stakes have to be to other people around him, and the stakes have to be the city itself is in peril or other things. It's a very, we call it dancing through raindrops in terms of like trying to tell a story with all of these obstacles and continuity. And after doing that for a number of years at Marvel, I was losing my mind, and it wasn't entirely what I got into comic books to do. And so I needed to definitely take a break from all of that. And I think that at a certain point for readership, you come in, you fall in love with Marvel and DC Comics, and as you get older and you still love comic books, the beauty is that then there's another step, and you can move on to you know, things that are going on at Image or Vertigo or Dark Horse or places, you know, or Top Shelf or Fantagraphics, and on and on and on.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, we have a lot of customers that come in and they start, say, buying DC and Marvel. And then very soon, you know, they're adding stuff to their subs that they would probably not have looked at before. And then actually you see as they mature as I say mature as comic book readers, they venture away from the Marvel and the DC and they go for all the mini-series and, you know, the creator-owned stuff. And it's really nice to see them do that, you know, like see them grow beyond superheroes. It's good.
Yeah, and it's been something that, you know, we've been fighting in this industry for a long time, going back to, you know, the 70s and 80s, and when guys like Kirby went off to try and make their own books, at first comics, and then eventually it finally kind of blew up with Image and Vertigo kind of finding a wider audience in the early 90s, and then both of those places kind of finding their niche and their footholds. And, you know, I entered comics in 1997 because I was such a fan of Dan Klaus and Evan Dorkin and Jamie Hewlett and the people that were doing the kinds of, you know, comics that inspired me were Adrian Tomei's Optic Nerve at that point, or what Grant Morrison and you know, all of those wonderful artists were doing at Vertigo, and that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do sort of absurdist creator-owned things. I wanted to do genre stuff that was interesting and hadn't, and you know, anyway. And we're finally at a point in the industry where it's what people want. And, you know, books that I did like Strange Girl and Fear Agent, you know, 10, 12 years ago, we're seeing sales upticks on those as more and more people venture into buying, you know, unique creator-owned books and stories that aren't tethered to other books.
Yeah, tie-ins. I'll be happy if I never see another event tie-in in my life, I think.
They're aged.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I've worked on that stuff, and I think it's great. It's great for I think you age out of it. I think it's great when you're, you know, when you're 13, 14 reading that stuff, and you're like reading the main event, and then you go over here and you see what, you know, this character, what happened to them when they did. And then at a certain point, it's maybe not intellectually as satisfying.
Yeah, I think I find that, as I'm sure Lucy and Sarah do with their customers, that the people that have been reading for years, every time there's a big sort of summer event, they just go, oh, I can't do this again. It gets a bit paint by numbers. Yeah. I think a lot of them.
And at a certain age and at a certain point, being immersed in comic books, it's not for us anymore. You know. It's for the 13, 14, and 15 and 16-year-old, you know, kids who are still, and I'm not saying that it has to be capped there. There's obviously older people who read and enjoy them, and, you know, find the connection to their childhood through them, things like that. But ultimately, it's nice to see that we are, you know, maturing as an industry to the point where creator-owned and unique stories are getting more of a foothold and more readers.
Yeah, I think that's I've noticed a lot of people of the fans of the Captain America Winter Soldier movie have come in asking for more Bucky books, and your Bitter March one is one that people seem to like because it's its own thing,
right? Like
it isn't part of some huge massive thing that you have to go and read all this. Like even the Captain America Winter Soldier book, it's incredible, but it's like a big book. Whereas the Bitter March, it's like enough to be like, yeah, this is the traumatized Bucky that I want in my life. And it's just this, it's a concise, like, yep, this is it. This is the exact perfect tone and everything that I need from a Bucky story. Now I can go and read about someone else.
I think the challenge of writing that stuff for me was always to try and make them feel self-contained and interconnected. So the Bitter March introduces Ran Shen, who becomes the Iron Nail and depowers Steve Rogers and plays a pretty big role over in the Captain America book. But I sort of liked the idea that his introduction and who he was started off as the hero. And he was he was a SHIELD agent. And he was, you know, during the Cold War, you know, trying to help out with X, Y, and Z dealing with Hydra. And hopefully you can do those things where they are self-contained and people could read one trade paperback and be satisfied. But if they wanted to then keep going, they could then tie in and read the other stuff. I think that, and it's very difficult to accomplish that. I found that balancing act became quite frustrating trying to pull it off.
Yeah, I can imagine. Sarah, have you got any Facebook questions?
We have a couple, yeah. First question is from Michael Thompson. And, oh no, that's the TV show. We've already covered that. So the second one is from Christopher Smith, and he says, is there a set plan for ending Black Science, or are you leaving yourself to the option of keeping it going indefinitely if you come up with ideas to extend it past issue 40?
We have it written up until issue 40 right now. And to answer that question, I would probably show my hand a little bit. I think that the ending that we have devised and the way that Matteo and I have decided to execute it, I don't think it's been done in comics before. And maybe once we do it, I'll find out that somebody had done it. But I truly, you know, I'm pretty sure it hasn't, and I'm pretty excited about the way that it's going to come together. So, as to whether or not there could be more stories after that, I you know, never say never. I think that we really love the book and we really love the cast. What we have coming up with it is kind of, again, it's difficult to talk without kind of showing my hand a little bit. I just think that ultimately, I believe we stick a pretty good landing at issue 40. You know, I came to a conclusion after Fear Agent. When we ended Fear Agent, we were all very proud of the ending, and I think that the fan reaction was very positive. And so every time we would come back around to, do we relaunch Fear Agent because we missed the characters and we sort of wanted to do more, and it happened with Strange Girl as well. I always kind of came to the conclusion that we stuck a landing. The story had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's kind of nice. It's kind of nice for it to be. It's a big story. If you like the first trade of Black Science, by the end there'll be 8 or 9 trades for you to read and 3 hardcovers and plenty of material for people to dig into. But ultimately, it also I think it benefits the story for us to stick to the ending we have planned and allow it to sort of, you know, be finite.
Plus, there's something, I think, in my opinion, so satisfying about having a story with an end.
Yeah.
Maybe
sure.
Because I've grown up, you know, reading Batman, for example, where you never have a payoff. It's really nice to know at some point that the story is finished. But obviously there are ways of going about that now that means you can write other stories that happen before then and things like that. So
there's for sure. Yeah. And the thing for me, though, is that I really enjoy developing new stories and new characters and new ideas, and it keeps the writing experience fresh for me because each book is developed in tandem with the artist, and we co-own it. And so it's a partnership and a pure collaboration. And while we do that, I find that I'm more able to infuse that new story with sort of what I'm going through or where my head is at. You know, in 2013, when Sean Murphy and I started developing Tokyo Ghost, I had really come to terms with my digital addiction. You know, I looked around my desk and there was, you know, 4 monitors, an iPad, you know, iPhone. I basically was checking email or looking at this every minute. And something that Sean, you know, in a conversation also was experiencing. And that coupled with the idea that content was king and that we would see somebody like Donald Trump become leader of the free world, which is an idea that we hit in 2013, still really terrifies me. But ultimately is great because now I had that book going while he was running for president, and I got to use a lot of what I was feeling and the frustrations that I felt and put it inside in the work there. So the short version of that is I do think that it's nice to end these and then start something new, you know, and kind of infuse it with whatever zeitgeisty stuff is bubbling in the subconscious.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's quite clear with a lot of writers that they tend to input, you know, the things that are happening in their day-to-day lives, or, you know, their feelings towards certain things. Like, I quite enjoy books with political undertones, for example, because it's quite interesting to see that kind of thing from someone else's perspective, because for me it's so easy to get so caught in the way that I feel about it that I quite often forget to see that.
Well, and the internet is created with algorithms that keep you in a safe bubble of ideas. And I think that that's the most dangerous aspect of modern society, is we are all left, right, center, 100% convinced that we are right because we are only being fed information from our, you know, people who agree with us.
Yeah.
And so I like things that have a point and have something to say, especially if I don't agree. I remember I saw Henry Rollins do a spoken word years ago during the Bush administration, and he said he watches Fox News a lot, and everybody gave him a boo. And he goes, "No, man, know your enemy. You know what they're thinking. Know how they look at the world. Keep your eye on the other side." And I think that's important. I think it's important. So, I mean, I try not to be heavy-handed with any of my politics. I try not to be heavy-handed with any of my, you know, ideology or philosophy. But and anytime I sort of infuse a character with one notion or one idea, I really work hard to try and give a counterbalance, so that opposing point of view is also presented, and they're not just straw men who are morons, because that's also a lot of the danger I see that we're falling into.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's quite scary to watch. We have another question here from Joe Hopkins, and he says, is there one book that you've either written or illustrated that you would go back and change now?
That I would change? That's interesting. I mean, that's a tough one. Change. I think that for the most part, because of the method I use to create my creator-owned books, they're all sort of pure to the intention that I had at the time. So while I might look back at early Strange Girl or Night Mary or Fear Agent, and I've never reread any of my stuff, but if I were to look back at them, I'm sure I would wince at some of the little craft tweaks and nerdy birdie grammar things that I was messing up. But in terms of actually rehauling story stuff, I mean, you know, the raindrops you have to navigate at Marvel became a bit much for me, and some people work really well in that environment, and you know, the characters that you can have and can't have, and the continuity you have to dance through, and the editorial influence in story, and how the story is rolled out, and the design of the covers and things. In my creator-owned work, I'm able to collaborate with my artist and control that stuff. And so what comes out, I always feel is our very best foot forward, and perfectly represents what we were trying to do as a team. The Marvel stuff is a job where you attempt that, and some of the stuff is that, and some of it isn't. So without pointing at any specific works, I'd say that there's a couple things that I did during my time at Marvel that I'd you know, probably erase if I could, or rework.
Oh, that's cool.
I have a bit of a self-indulgent question. You've also worked on two of my favorite animated movies, which is Iron Giant and Titan AE. And I just wanted to ask, just like, can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Sure. Well, I when I was 21, Don Bluth opened an animation studio. He teamed up with 20th Century Fox, and they started developing a feature called Anastasia. And I, at the time, sort of divided my time up between writing and art, and I wasn't sure which I would do. And in fact, at 21, you know, hanging out with a bunch of punkers and being up to no good, I didn't think that there was a future in any of that stuff, and I thought it was just something that I was passionate about and loved, but ultimately I'd probably have to go get a real job at some point. But I had, you know, I had large portfolio of work at that point. I had studied on focused on art and creative writing in college, and so I sent my work in to Don Bluth when the studio opened, and somehow I got hired. And so they trained me to animate, and I worked as an assistant on Anastasia, and then at the beginning of Titan AE, and then I went to Warner Brothers in Los Angeles, and I worked on The Iron Giant for a little while, and that was an experience where I was ready to start moving around, because one of the reasons that comic books were always so alluring to me is I love the art form, I love the expression, I love the purity of intention, where only a few people can tell an entire story without a committee, and there's just, comic books have always, I'm probably gonna spend my whole life giving everything I have to them. I'm just addicted to the process. But at the time, I had quit my job in animation to create a couple comic books. One of them, an absurdist humor book that was sort of inspired by Frank Zappa, and then another one, sort of, a punk rock comic book called Blackheart Billy that was just more absurdist humor. And neither one were generating much income. So then I felt like I was having to do this terrible thing, which was to take another job in animation. I moved to Los Angeles for a few months. And once I got into Warner Brothers and saw the reel for The Iron Giant, I was gobsmacked at how good it was. I mean, and here you're watching an anime, and it's only half finished at that point. So there's plenty of the movie that is just, storyboarded and then a little bit of animation. But by the time I had finished watching it, I was just so excited to be lucky enough to be a part of it. And, my contributions are I was an effects artist, so I was working on things like the swirling smoke coming out of, the Iron Giant's boots and things like that. So I was by no means a major force in the film, but I was fortunate enough to be able to work on something that I really loved and have my name in the credits. Yeah, and it was clear. It was clear at the time that it was just nothing like this had been done in so long. Where it had the heart and the integrity and the smarts and the emotional impact of the best Disney movie, and probably surpassed that. But it also had, Kish, and it appealed to I guess it had a little bit of rock and roll in it. I don't know how else to explain it, but it was really nice when I saw it. I wasn't just spending 2 months grinding my pencil on something that I didn't like.
No, that's awesome. I agree. I'm a giant Disney fan, but The Iron Giant is something else, I think.
I know we're here talking about comics, but you've just been like, oh, I worked on Anastasia and Iron Giant. I'm like, oh my gosh!
I've rumbled around from desk to desk doing odd jobs. Yeah, the thing that was odd is that I had so many opportunities in animation, and then the animation work led to video game work, where I was storyboarding games at Electronic Arts, and then that led to writing video games like Dead Space and Bulletstorm, and doing kind of over the top crazy science fiction video games, and but none of it, and it was all very rewarding and fun and paid very well. But I just kept going back to comic books, and to the chagrin of everyone around me, I would walk away. I was invited to be one of the head storyboard guys on the Simpsons video games for Electronic Arts, and the '90s. I lived in a shitty apartment with with some friends, and we didn't watch TV or have cable. Those were my formative partying years for the most part. But we did watch The Simpsons every Sunday in the '90s, and that was back when that show was really something special, and it formed so much of my sense of humor. So when EA offered me that job to storyboard The Simpsons, I had to make a choice, which was, do I take this job that I would love that pays a lot of money, or do we leave San Francisco because it was getting too expensive, move to Portland because it's affordable, and I keep grinding out comic books. And for some reason, I was like, yeah, comic books and poverty is what I chose again and again and again.
Well, that's what we've all chosen as well.
and eventually, I remember when I was 37 or 38, which is going, I'm 43 now, so it was a few years ago, when people started to read my X-Force, and I think Fear Agent and X-Force both kind of found an audience at the same time. And people finally were like, oh, hey, I did so many interviews that year where people said, you came out of nowhere, and you were an overnight success. And it was such a funny feeling to have put in, at that point, I'd been doing comics for 13 years, and to have all these people sort of acknowledging that they had no idea that I was even in comic books. It was nice. It was every one of those comments and interviews was a nice kick in the teeth. And it's like, good, it keeps you humble. Like, okay, 13 years and nobody was reading it. Okay, good, yep. I'll Oh.
Lucy, is there anything on YouTube?
Yeah, I was just about to say.
You beat me to it.
The podcast finally. An Englishman in San Diego has asked 2 questions. Number 1, what's your work environment? Do you work to strict hours, or do you just work when the muse takes you?
I found that the muse is elusive, and usually born out of marijuana induced. No, that's not true. Hold on, let me rewind. If I waited for the muse, I wouldn't get much done. The muse comes, where that perfect idea hits you when you're standing someplace and you hear one conversation, and all the zeitgeisty things kind of cook up into something. But I book myself with 3 titles at minimum at all times, because I find that the butane flame on my ass forces me to come to the desk and work if I feel like it or not. And I've come to the conclusion that when there is no muse and I don't feel like working, and I sit down and start working, 2 hours in, the muse just shows up, and the muse is like, hey, what's happening? No, here's an idea. And I say, thanks, muse. And we have a high five, and and a snack. But no, so by having a lot of work kind of planned out ahead of me, it forces me to constantly be working, and that forces me to write, which forces me to figure out ideas. Occasionally there's times where I find that I'm uninspired, and what I've written might seem uninspired, or there's times that I realize that this is sort of, I'm falling on my story vocabulary, meaning that I'm maybe regurgitating something that I've expressed before. And if a few of those have made it into the comics, but most of the time I'm able to catch those. And so my work hours, I have I work in the basement of my house as a troglodyte caveman. My kids run down every so often, and I dance like a clown and entertain them, and then I get back to the computer and type. And I try and just squeeze 8 to 12 hours in every day, and I'll work 3 hours, and then my son will come home from school, and I'll go upstairs and wrestle with him or play for an hour, and come back and work, and then go back and have dinner with the family and read a book and put him to bed and come back and work. And my wife works at home as well, and she curates a children's clothing line. So we both kind of balance working at home and hanging out and kids. And it's madness. It's just madness. There's no chaos. There's no schedule to any of it. Was there a second part? I'm forgetting.
Do you find it quite hard to balance your work time and your family time when you all work in the same house?
Yeah, and you know what the bummer is I everyone I know who has jobs, and especially here, we moved to Los Angeles about 3 years ago because we're nomadic. I met my wife in New York, went to San Francisco, and then we went to Pacifica, and then we went to Portland, and then we went to lived on the beach, and now we're in LA. So the benefit of it is that we can be nomadic. Since I've known my wife since we met when I was 29, we've lived all over the West Coast together, and she's from Leicestershire, so she's also a Brit, and so it benefits us in that regard. But I think that so all the friends I have that are sort of stuck in one location where their job is and have to drive in every day, they go, oh, it must be great, get to work at home. And I look down at myself wearing the same pajamas that I've been wearing for a week in my sort of disheveled state. You know, I can only imagine when the UPS guy shows up, he must think that I'm like a vagrant who snuck into the house. I'm like, you know, packages, thank you, sir. And it definitely has pros and cons. You're never at home and you're never at work is how it's expressed best. You're at work for 3 hours, and then my daughter will scream for something, and I'll run upstairs and hang out with her for an hour. Or, you know, she's an artist as well. She's 7, and so she really loves. I have a Cintiq at my animation desk, and she'll come down and draw while I work and hang out. And it blurs the lines. You know, work is to the point where I kind of miss, like, I'm up at 8. I'm out the door. I have my coffee. There's my bagel. I'm at work. Now I'm coming home. And when you come home and you have a day job, you're home. It's like you left all that shit behind you, and you're like, you are where you are. You're able to be far more present. And when you work at home, it takes a real concerted effort to say to yourself, okay, you have a lot of work going on, and the emails are filling up, and you have 15 scripts due, but it's time to have dinner with your family and read your kids a book and be present for that. And you have to make a real concerted effort, and it's you mentally denote it as, okay, work is over, I'm home now. And then when that's done, you drift back into the office.
Yeah, I can imagine that's quite difficult. I mean, I have a 5-year-old, and obviously sometimes running the comic book shop does kind of come home with me, and I have to remind myself to just be with him for a bit, instead of thinking like, oh, I need to post that thing and sort that order.
Well, to be present for it, because it goes by. Yeah. I'm sure, as you know, the last 5 years, my son just had his 6th birthday yesterday, and it's just a blink of an eye, you know. And now he's a little person, and it just all happened. And
See,
so,
as someone who owns a business, I struggle to time manage myself. So to put kids in the factor, I give up. I'm like, no, can't do both.
you can. It's crazy. You find. I thought. Look, I mean, I didn't have kids until I guess, what was I, 30? So for 36, I was 36, almost 37, and I didn't know how this was going to work out. I was terrified of it, but it just enriches everything. And when you do it, ultimately, you just find an extra gear. You know, you thought you were running at full speed, and then you figure out, you're like, oh, well, I guess I can sleep 2 hours less every night, and I guess I can take them out in the rain, because we were in Portland when we had the kids, and it was just, my wife, being English, is like, you know, pip pip chip chip, puts on her galoshes and just.
That is how we talk, yeah.
That's how the English speak.
It was a perfect.
I know, guys. Listen, I know. And she would just take
Mary
the kids.
Poppins.
She would just go do shit. And I literally withered. I moved up there, and I was a skate rat from San Francisco who I skated every day, and I was in shape, and didn't have a car. And then we moved to Portland, and it rained for 9 months out of the year, and I was just locked inside. Like, I guess I'm just going to eat peanut butter again. I just wasn't programmed to do that part. But, you know, you find other gears in terms of how you can fit in the kids and also get your work done. But it's no joke. I mean, if anybody tells you like, it's not a big deal, no, it's a big deal.
Yeah,
but rewarding, and they're great. Yay.
They are. But on that same note, I mean, you say your wife's English. Do you think it was difficult for her to transition to life in America?
Yeah, you know, when I met her, she had moved to New York, and I guess she was 22 when we met. I would have been 29, and she was in New York, or was she 23? It doesn't matter. She was. Anyway, but she had lived there, I guess, for about 1.5 to 2 years prior to me meeting her. And I was in San Francisco, and I was up there trying to get work at Marvel in DC, and I had failed. I was inking the Avengers back then, and I had given up another animation job to do more comics, and so I was like, I'm going to go to New York, and I'm going to pitch some stories, and I'm going to get a job writing comics. And I didn't. I got laughed at, and the editors were like, aren't you an inker? And I was like, oh, fuck. So I got a bottle of whiskey, and I drank a bottle of whiskey. It was actually, it was just, you know, just some Jameson. And I drank most of that bottle and went out and met this really cute blonde Brit, and was like, hey, you should totally move to San Francisco. And I somehow suckered her into that shit. I'm like, hey, I'm super unemployed right now, and I live in a converted garage with some punkers. Do you like cigarette smoke and not being able to control the heat?
That's when you know it's love and it still works.
And she's like, sure, yeah, that sounds terrific. And her work visa was up and all these things, but she moved to San Francisco, and we moved in together almost after having only known each other for a couple months. And I found that, you know, she you know, at this point, she's gone from New York to San Francisco to South San Francisco and Pacifica, up to Portland, down to Newport Beach, where we lived for a couple years to raise the babies on the beach, and now to LA. She adapts in ways that I do not. She is way more versatile and elastic. I like moving around and experiencing new places, but for me, it was always just like, but on the West Coast of America. You know, like, I'm very worldly if the world is living on the West Coast of America. But she's been far more versatile and able to bounce around. And when we would move to a new city, she knew Los Angeles within, you know, 3 months. And I've been here for 2.5 years, and I still go out and, you know, I'm like an old man screaming at the clouds, like, where do I go to find the, you know, the grocery store? Lady. Stumbling, delirious, peeing my pants. So I think that, you know, probably you guys are all built with better circuitry than at least than myself, because she definitely does a better job and she's in a different country, you know, so like how, you know, 15 hours away from.
I think one thing that I noticed from going to America that may have had some sway in her getting to know places is that your streets make so much more sense than ours.
Yeah.
That's what Danny says.
Like I've been to San Diego like 2 years in a row now for the Comic-Con, and this year I decided to take a bit more time on my own outside of the convention. And someone said to me, oh yeah, if you want to go and get a good sandwich, you should go to this supermarket, and if you go to the corner of this street and this number. And I was like, oh, hang on, if that's number 1, I just walked down 7 more, and like all of a sudden it made so much sense.
Right.
Whereas
Well, it's a grid.
here, you can't
new
do
cities.
that. Yeah.
Like, you know, how you compare like San Diego compared to London and the amount of time it's existed. You know, the last time we were in London, we were walking around. I guess it was before the last time. And I was just like, and then the roads curve and turn and twist and turn into this, and it's like a wonderful maze of history. Whereas, you know, we threw up San Diego last week, basically. So, like, all right, we're gonna put in a grid here. Subway goes there. Gas station done.
But it's so logical.
Yeah, we work on bends. Many bends and roundabouts.
Bends and roundabouts. Yeah, I didn't try to drive when I was there, but Danny picked up driving on the, you know, changing the side of the road. That to me is like, I'm gonna kill somebody for sure.
Yeah,
if you guys
I've
put
not
me on the wrong side of the road.
I think that's maybe a little beyond my expertise.
Yeah, that's like at this it's like trying to learn a new language at this age. I'm like, I think that ship sailed. My brain is like petrified wood at this point. I don't think there's much elasticity left in it.
No,
have you got any plans to come back to the UK for any conventions?
I did Leeds last year, and that was wonderful, except for the rain, goddamn rain. I mean, look, the rain, I'm just not built for it. And after 5 years in Portland, it's raining here in Los Angeles right now, and we desperately needed it after extreme drought, and I still curse it. I curse its wetness and its cold rain, its cold gray attitude. Stupid water sky drippings. So yeah, Leeds was great for what I got to see through all the fucking rain. And what I always do is I made the mistake on that trip of like, oh, I'll just fly in on Thursday and do Leeds Friday, Saturday, and then fly home Sunday. That is a shitty thing to do to your body.
Yeah,
so you just slingshot yourself to the other side of the world. Got into London totally jet lagged. I went up with Jerome Opeña and Farrell Dalrymple, who are a couple of artists who are genius pencil masters and friends of mine. So I wanted to have fun with them. So we went out and tried to get drunk in London that night. Did a signing at Gosh, which what a great shop. But then, you know, you're jet lagged and trying to get drunk and, you know, old, like, ugh. And then took a train to Leeds, tried to get drunk there and hadn't slept, and then did the show. And what a great, I mean, because I'd never been there, it was crazy. There was lines around the place and everybody was super friendly and funny and great. And I was delirious from not sleeping. But really, Thought Bubble was one of the best shows I've done. Again, other than the endless drizzling rain, which nobody can control.
I still can't believe I have never gone to Thought Bubble. It makes me angry.
Oh,
It should make
so
you
good.
angry. How far are you from Leeds?
Not that far, only about an hour on the train. But there always seems to be another closer convention on the same weekend here.
Yeah, well, you got to go to Thought Bubble. It's a perfect show, and it's really well run. They have a nice. It's all, you know. I always check out the guest lineup. They have a really great and diverse group of people. And anyway, so that was, and the London Con has invited me a few times, and I haven't been able to go. We've been trying to like line it up to where I would do that, and then we'd go up to Leicestershire and hang out with the in-laws. But I'm writing a lot of books and raising kids, so anytime I try to plan any of these trips, Leeds was such a shock to my system. When I got home, I was like lying on the floor, just like a puddle. I'm not ever doing an international show. I had to turn down Angoulême, dealing with some family issues, my dad's health, and I had to turn down Sao Paulo, Brazil. I had to turn down 3 shows in Mexico. I had to turn down Paris. I had to turn down Italy and Spain. And all these things I would have killed for, you know, when if it would have just happened 8 years ago when I was still a little more spry. If it happened when I was 34, I had a little pep left in the step and no kids to juggle, that would have been wonderful. But so unfortunately, it's very difficult for me to make the shows and keep the books and the TV show going and raise the kids so that they're not like, yeah, I guess my dad likes comics more than me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That's not a conversation
definitely
I want
a balance.
when they're like 20. Like, didn't you love us? Because, you know, I'm like, yeah, comics, right? This one is a guy, he's addicted to technology. He's got a girlfriend who's codependent, but she's tough as hell. And like, Dad, I don't care. No one cares anymore. They got lost in time and you fucked up. So yeah, balancing of schedule and all that stuff. I will probably try, if I do it again, is to come back to Thought Bubble.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I need to get up to that. I'm London end of the country, so it's further away from me.
Right. That's
But you can come and stay at mine.
London to Leeds by train. I don't remember it being terrible.
Yeah, that's my plan. I'm hoping to get up there, but my little shop, it's only me that works there, so it's figuring out the boring logistics of that, and stuff like that. But I do want to get up there because I've just heard it's amazing.
Yeah, see, it's one of those shows. I make a point every year of going to Thought Bubble, London Super Comic Con, and then this year I also went to Nice Comic Con in Bedford, which I think now is going to be on my definitely to-do list. But yeah, London Super and Thought Bubble are brilliant.
I can't imagine you get a lot of time, to be honest, but is there anything that you've read, like comic-wise recently, that you've just thought was amazing?
No, I haven't read a comic book in so long. I have people I respect and love, and they'll send me their comps. Well, all right. What was the last thing I read? And I think Wicked and Divine is always a lot of fun when I read it. I managed to dive in and out. but geez, the last time I read one of those, I was talking to Kieran probably 6 months ago, and I was like, oh, and I downloaded a few and read it. But you know, the thing is, and I remember hearing, I think it was Jim Starlin or somebody, when I was 20 or 19, and I was just a comic book freak at that point. I'd been into it since I was 10 or 11, and for me, it was like comic books, skateboarding, and punk rock were everything that meant anything to me. And I would read every single, you know, pro interview. And this is back before the internet. God, I love how dated that makes me. Oh, old. And I remember reading, I think it was Jim Starlin saying that he was so busy working in comics and getting his work done and juggling life, he didn't have time to read comics. And I remember my reaction to that being sort of, well, what the fuck is wrong with you? How would you stop reading comic books? And here I am. You realize with the amount of time in the day, and you know, if I put in 10 or 11 hours typing and writing and thinking and doing comics, when that's over with, the very last thing I'm thinking is, hey, I'm going to read some comic books.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to run to the hills and slash my wrists.
Don't do that. So I have a question personally. Is there an artist that you would love to work with that you haven't worked with yet?
I'm really sorry. Before Rick answers that, I can't last the hour. I've tried to last as long as possible, but my friends are shouting at me for my friend's birthday dinner, and so I'm really sorry. I have to leave before I have to make a dramatic exit and go. But it was lovely to meet you, Rick. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was really nice talking with you.
Thank you, and I'll see
Bye,
you.
Lucy.
Love you.
Bye, Lucy.
Bye. How do I hang up? Oh, there you go. Bye.
Hello. So yeah, is there an artist that you would love to work with that you haven't yet?
The dream from my childhood, the dream too, would be Mike Zack and Kevin Nolan. And I got, the closest I got was I did a book called Doll and Creature, which was about goth culture taking over the world and religion becoming illegal and monsters roaming the streets. It was a crazy affair. And Kieran Dwyer did a cover, and I got Kevin Nolan to ink it, which was a treat. And Mike Zack was obviously one of my very favorites as a kid, and I think he's still one of the all-time greats in comics. Modern guys, off the top of my head, I mean, Jock is obviously a wonderful genius. It would be great to work with him at some point. I actually have some stuff coming up with, you know, the next 3 names that I came to. I actually have projects in the works with, so I don't want to mention them and spoil anything. You know, the thing is, there's so many.
There are.
Vanessa Del Rey is someone who, she just did a Deadly class cover for us, and I've been following her work forever, and she's so brilliant. But I think that something got in, I don't know if it's because the population exploded with the millennials and there's more humans drawing now. You know, Generation X in America adds up to 38 million, I read, and the millennials are like 82 million. So maybe as the millennials came of age, there just was like so many amazing artists everywhere.
Yeah,
but
there are an absolute ton.
It's endless, and it's like, and then I mean, it's endless A-level talent that just keeps popping up.
Yeah,
I'll find a new brilliant artist, you know, almost daily, following a link from another artist. So
yeah. I mean,
but it's like the artists that you choose seem to fit the stories that you put them with so perfectly. Like, it's like with Tokyo Ghost and even with Deadly Class as well. It's like they were born to illustrate that book.
Well, I think that's because of the nature of the development process, and I'm glad to hear that. These aren't books that are made on a conveyor belt where, you know, the writer on high comes up with his idea and hands it to the lowly artist, you know, like, make my idea. Sean and I, Tokyo Ghost, we spent literally a year on the phone building and talking ideas and cracking open story and debating and building that story. And so there's so much of both of us in it. And ultimately, I am the writer, and the final say on dialogue, and a lot of the character stuff is me. But so much of the other stuff in terms of the story and the world and the tone and the themes we're exploring, all that stuff, a lot of that is cooked up in conversations with the artists. And so I think that also, well, hopefully, and it seems to have been working, it invests them in the process, I think, to a different degree.
Yeah, it just makes such a cohesive thing. Like everything fits together. Feels like it fits together how it should. And I've got I assume you've seen them. The big hardbacks that Image have done that are like the kind of oversized hardbacks. Sure. And like in those especially, like I love that they release them in that format, so you get it in that big, glorious way. And just everything. I'm waiting for the Tokyo Ghost one of those because everything just fits with it, which is lovely. Because
if the art's, I'm very fortunate that the guys and gals that I'm working with are so talented that I'm able to. Yeah, I think that that format is something that I pushed for on Fear Agent. I recognized I had a book that was drawn by Jerome Opeña and Tony Moore and Mike Hawthorne, and it's the best work that those guys are capable of. And it deserved to be in the library edition format. And at that point, Dark Horse had only really done that library format with I think Hellboy and maybe a few others. So it was a fight to get them to do it. But once we did it, we sold tens and tens of thousands of copies of that. Here's a book that was only by the end, Fear Agent was only selling 4,000 copies. Everybody kept telling me, you're a fool, and nobody wants science fiction. And I said, okay, I'm just going to do it anyway. But by the end, the last issue only sold 4,000 copies. And when I finally convinced Dark Horse to put out the library editions and do it in that big oversized format, it exploded because people could see all these wonderful, Jerome Opeña and Tony Moore pages blown up at full size, and in that format, if the art warrants it, it's the best way to experience it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the library editions and absolute editions of books. I think it really brings like another level of immersed to your reading because you literally can't see anything past the book.
Right? Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And that's something that comic books does. What else can do that? Even a really nice movie theater with a big screen, you still see plenty of other stuff in the room and people. But those big library editions of the books, you're basically completely immersed in it. You have to read them at a table, I think, for it to be comfortable. But
I've mastered the art of the one-arm support.
Oh, have you?
I've got that down. I'm going to put it on my CV as skills.
Can read omnibus in bed.
Yes, without breaking nose.
Yeah, I did nearly drop the Deadly Class on my face the other day.
It's big. I got a box of prompts, and my wife was like, "What the hell is this?" It's a workout, and I opened it up, and I'm like, "Wow, yeah, these things they're no joke." But I don't know, they look nice on a bookshelf.
They do.
Yeah, see, I count it as me not having to have a gym membership anymore because I do a delivery every Tuesday.
I can keep my brain and body healthy by reading books so big that I'm getting a bicep workout.
Plus, it's a core workout as well. You have to try and keep the upper half of you upright.
Right.
But I think we only have time for one more question. And it's a question that we ask everyone that comes on this show because it's a particular favourite thing of ours. Go on, Holly.
The most important question is, what is your favourite cheese?
Oh, Manchego.
Oh, good choice.
I like how quick the answer was as well. You knew.
Well, my wife does the cheese platter, and boy, that was something that my cultureless American ass was not ready for. And fortunately, because I was also very thin when I met her, and she's like, "Hey, check this out. Here's 20 cheeses," and I'm like, "All right." Yes. And then the next thing you know, you're like, "Oh my God, 20 cheeses is a great thing. Give me some of this quince paste, and give me some of that fucking grapes." And you know, she I remember she was like, "Oh no, you put the brie in the oven, you bake the brie, and then you put grapes in it and do this." And I'm like, "So we're just gonna straight eat some fucking cheese." Like, it's pretty good. But you wake up.
Nice, the best.
She
did a good job.
Yeah, yeah. I can thank her for my jowls. Like,
well, I've always said, you know, like if you get to be really old and you're not massively overweight, you have not tried enough delicious food.
Well, that's probably true. I always had a theory that she was trying to find the perfect balance where she kept me like just chubby enough to be fuckable, but also just chubby enough where no one else was gonna make the attempt. It was like I was a science experiment that she was like, you know, like here's cheese, eat this brick of cheese, and then she would like weigh me and look me over like, you know, like Hansel and Gretel's witch, like, okay, I can still deal with you naked, but I don't think anybody else will. Let's pull back on the cheese now.
See, it's a good theory, but in fact, it's just that she's British and we're obsessed.
Yeah, that's probably
change
true.
your bio to that. Change your bio, Rick Remender, just chubby enough to be fuckable.
Yeah, I am teetering right on that brink, I think. And that's when she'll pull the cheese out of the house. She goes, "No more cheese," and then I'll start shrinking, and she goes, "Oh, a little more cheese."
What you need is a little robot that just grates the sufficient amount onto all of your food.
Right. Yes. We're going to develop artificial intelligence for that purpose.
Yes.
Welcome to the world, you know, Robotitron. What will I do for you? You know, you're going to grate the cheese in the perfect amount.
8.2 grams.
to keep me fat enough that my wife can still fuck me, but no one else will.
See? Perfection.
Oh,
Perfect.
We've got it all worked.
Good
Well,
times.
I think that might be time for us to call it a day. But it's been...
Uh-oh, Sarah's gone robotic.
Oh no!
Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
no.
Am I
You're back? Yeah.
I was just saying how lovely it's been to have you with us, and that we really appreciate you coming on and spending an hour talking to us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate all the support on the comical books and in the shops.
Problem.
Thank you for making marvelous stuff for us to sell.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
I
awesome.
just said awesome.
Cool.
That's that word. Let's not end on me saying awesome.
Cool.
But that was a lot. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been great.
Fun. A lovely time.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And yeah, we will keep doing the selling if you keep doing the making.
Deal.
And to everyone that's watching, thank you very much for joining us. And we shall see you in 2 weeks' time, I believe, where we have Liam Sharp that's currently working on Wonder Woman.
He's a genius.
Yeah, he will be joining us. Yeah. So make sure you check out all our social media stuff. At the Gamma Dames on Twitter is the best if you want to tweet us about the show or any of that stuff. And you can find Rick at Remender, I think. Is that right?
That is correct.
Awesome. Right, well, thank you very much, everybody, and we shall see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye. Bye.